A quick like and subscribe really helps our channel grow and allows us to bring you even more amazing content. Thank you for your support. I never imagined that losing weight would lead to me being in the middle of a workplace drama, but here I am, sharing my story, hoping to find some clarity. Just a few months ago, I was sitting in an office cubicle, feeling overwhelmed and self-conscious, my body holding on to extra pounds that I had come to accept as part of me. But after a serious health scare, I decided to get serious about my fitness. I spent countless hours in the gym, swapped fast food for salads, and traded late-night Netflix binges for evening runs. Gradually, the scales tipped in my favor, and before I knew it, I had shed nearly 30 pounds. With my newfound confidence, I felt ready to take on the world, or at least my job at the marketing agency. As my clothes started to feel comically oversized, I figured I could do something nice with them. Enter Jenna, one of my coworkers who had been struggling with her own weight issues. We had shared a few conversations where she spoke about her desire to lose weight but was struggling to find motivation. One afternoon, as we sipped our afternoon coffees, I jokingly offered her some of my old clothes, their vibrant colors ready to be appreciated by someone who needed a confidence boost. Her initial reaction was laughter, and she brushed off the idea, but I could see a flicker of interest in her eyes. It felt good to offer her a lifeline, a way to feel better about herself without the financial burden of new clothes. However, I didn't anticipate the controversy it would stir. The next day, I approached her again, this time presenting a neatly folded pile of blouses and blazers from my closet. "I really think you'd look great in these," I said, feeling a bit sheepish but genuinely hoping to help. But then, her face fell. "I appreciate the thought, but I really don't want your hand-me-downs," she replied, her voice tight. I felt my heart sink. I was only trying to be helpful. But Jenna's discomfort didn't stop there. Over the next few days, I started to notice a shift in our interactions. She became distant, not just with me but with the whole team, as if the mere act of my offering had changed the energy in the room. I found myself questioning everything. Did I overstep? Was I the insensitive jerk that some pieces of the office gossip suggested? I thought things were innocent enough. I only wanted to share some clothes that I wasn't using. Days turned into weeks, and all our mutual acquaintances began commenting, whispering about my offer that had supposedly hurt Jenna's feelings. Each time I heard someone mention it, I felt a sting of regret, swirling like a storm in my gut. I wanted to reach out again, to clarify and apologize, but whenever I saw her in the break room, my heart raced, and I clamped my mouth shut. I worried about being seen as the villain instead of the supportive coworker I aimed to be. My stomach ached, and I felt all the confidence I had gained slowly begin to slip away. Finally, after a particularly tough week where the tension was palpable in the air, I decided enough was enough. I needed closure, not for my sake but for Jenna's too. I invited her for coffee, just the two of us. I took a deep breath, my heart drumming loudly as I sat across from her. "Jenna, I'm genuinely sorry if I crossed a line. I only wanted to help." She looked at me with this mixture of sadness and frustration, and for a moment, silence filled the space between us. Then she spoke, softer than I expected. "It's just, I've been struggling, you know? And being offered clothes when I already feel like a failure?" It felt like I was being given a reminder of everything I didn't achieve. As those words sank in, I realized that my intentions, no matter how good, had missed the mark entirely. After our talk, a weight lifted, and I could see the flicker of understanding in her eyes. We hadn't solved anything major that day, but we were able to at least acknowledge the issues around our insecurities and how they intertwined with our friendship. I promised myself to be more careful moving forward, knowing that sometimes, a helping hand can accidentally feel like a shove. As I walked back to my desk, a thought struck me: maybe we can't fix everything, but we can be honest about our feelings. I hoped this wasn't the end for Jenna and me but instead the beginning of a more genuine connection. A few weeks later, while cleaning out my closet again, I thought of her. I held onto those clothes but not out of guilt or as a reminder of my past, but as a nod to the complicated yet beautiful ways our paths crossed, forever reminding me to tread more gently in such delicate situations. The thoughts of Jenna lingered in my mind like the lingering scent of fading perfume, the good kind, the kind that brings back warmth rather than sadness. I spent the next few weeks navigating the delicate balance of our workplace dynamic. Each time I caught a glimpse of her, I felt a tug in my chest. She was becoming more than just a coworker. She was a reminder of empathy and understanding, the raw connection that can emerge from vulnerability. I remember one afternoon, I noticed Jenna in the break room, her shoulders slumped slightly as she stirred her coffee, lost in thought. I hesitated at the entrance, unsure if I should join her or give her space. But something nudged me forward, a quiet urge to ask, so I did. "Hey, you okay?" I ventured, my voice softer than I intended, slightly tinged with concern. Jenna looked up, surprise flickering across her face before she managed a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Just tired, you know?" she replied, but I could see the walls still standing. Instead of prying, I settled into a nearby chair, and we exchanged small talk, laughing about mundane things, each joke momentarily peeling back layers of her guarded demeanor. It felt good, like we were slowly weaving a new tapestry of friendship, a new bond built on honesty rather than the remnants of misunderstanding. Then one evening, as I sat on my bed staring at the growing mountain of clothes I had set aside for donation, a sudden urge overcame me. Maybe, just maybe, I could offer some of them to Jenna. I gathered a few pieces that I thought would suit her style, things I had loved, but now felt like remnants of someone else's life. I imagined her face lighting up as she tried them on, the tentative joy mirrored in her appreciative smile. But the moment I sealed that bag, doubt snuck in like a cold breeze through an open window. What if she took it the wrong way? What if it reminded her of her own struggles with weight and self-acceptance? The very last thing I wanted was for her to feel any sense of embarrassment or inadequacy. Still, I made a decision. I wouldn't let fear steer me clear of taking a chance to show kindness. The next day at work, I approached her after a meeting, heart racing as I felt the weight of the garment bag in my hands. "Hey, Jenna, do you have a minute?" I said, trying to keep my voice steady. She looked curious but cautious, and as I revealed the bag, I could practically see the gears turning in her mind. "These are some clothes I thought you might like. If you want them, great, if not, that's perfectly okay, too." Her eyes widened, a mixture of surprise and uncertainty flashing across her face. I watched her expression closely, fearing I'd overstepped. To my relief, she took a small step forward, reaching out to touch the fabric. "Really? You'd part with these?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper, and something about the vulnerability in her tone struck me. Here was someone who was beginning to peel back her own layers of insecurity, too. We spent a few moments going through the bag together. I noticed the way her nervous fingers grazed over the fabric, and I smiled when she found a favorite piece, an old cardigan I used to wear constantly. "This is really cute," she said, holding it up to her frame, and for the first time, I saw her smile genuinely, unfettered by her worries, and it felt like the sun breaking through clouds. Our conversation soon drifted to our shared experiences of battling our own reflections, and I could feel the barriers crumbling even further. She told me about her struggles with body image, and I found myself opening up about mine, an unexpected weight lifting as I articulated feelings I had kept bottled inside for years. But what surprised me most was the raw understanding that rippled between us, the way it felt like we were both navigating a path through the shadows of our past. When we parted that day, I had a flicker of hope in my chest, a small, glowing ember signaling that yes, maybe I hadn't messed things up completely with Jenna after all. Instead, perhaps we were finding something much stronger together, a connection that embraced our imperfections and uncertainties. A couple of weeks passed, and I noticed how our conversations deepened. Each friendly exchange, each shared laugh unfurled layers of kindness that illuminated our workdays. Eventually, I received a text from her late one evening, simple but profound. "Thank you for being so understanding, and for the clothes. Your kindness means more than you know." Reading those words, I felt a rush of warmth envelop me. This journey, still unfolding between us, had become something meaningful. Sometimes, I still catch myself reminiscing about Jenna and that moment in the break room, the moment that nudged me to embrace vulnerability and break down the walls we so often put up in our lives. Our paths intertwined beautifully, weaving a friendship rooted not just in shared experiences, but in the profound honesty of our journeys. I realized then that perhaps the greatest gift you can give someone isn't just your support, but also the chance to embrace their own story alongside yours. As for my closet, it remains a mixture of memories and reminders, each piece a testament to the bonds we form when we tread gently on the paths of others, opening ourselves to understanding and connection along the way. This newfound sense of understanding hung over me like a warm blanket, enriching my days at work. I felt lighter, not just from my physical transformation, but emotionally, too. Jenna and I launched into a friendship that surprised both of us. Lunchtime became a ritual of laughter and sharing secrets, the kind of bond that offers solace amidst the mundane. I even found myself looking forward to those small, fleeting moments, a shared joke, her eyes sparkling with mischief, or the way she'd roll her eyes but crack a smile when I made a goofy remark. That's what friendship can do. It nourishes you, fills the empty spaces in your heart that you didn't even know were there. But then came the day I noticed Jenna's mood shift. It was subtle at first, like a storm brewing in the distance. She would stare at her phone during lunch, her fingers curling and uncurling as if memorizing a dance routine she was suddenly unsure of. I felt a knot tightening in my stomach, that familiar twinge of empathy reminding me how little the surface can reveal. One afternoon, as we sat surrounded by the usual office chatter, I decided, no, I needed to broach the subject. Hey, what's going on? You've been a little off lately. I tried to sound casual, but even I could hear the concern lacing my voice. She looked up, surprise flickering across her face like the shadow of clouds passing by. It's nothing, she said, but her eyes told a different story. I sat still, not pressing but letting the silence wrap around us, allowing her to find her own words. She hesitated, glancing down at her untouched salad. I applied for a promotion and didn't get it. I thought I had a good chance. The vulnerability in her voice pierced through layers of practiced indifference. I remembered what it felt like to crave validation in a world that often seemed indifferent, a feeling we shared despite our stark differences. I'm really sorry to hear that, I said softly. I know how hard you worked for it. Just know that your talent and hard work don't go unnoticed. A small smile tugged at her lips, grateful yet fragile. As we exchanged words, the truth seeped in. Rejection had its own sting, one that could echo far beyond the workplace. Without really planning it, I felt myself bridging the gap that fear had created. You know, I still have those clothes I was telling you about. While they aren't a magic solution, I thought maybe you'd want to try them. They're just sitting there, I offered, hoping it wouldn't feel like pity. To my surprise, Jenna's brows furrowed, confusion coating her features. You sure that's okay? I mean, they were yours. Of course, I said, the conviction sweeping through me. It would mean a lot to see them put to good use. Besides, they're like a little part of our journey here, right? We stared at each other, a silent exchange deepening our connection even further. I saw her recognizing the hope within the gesture, the warmth of shared vulnerability transforming an old wound into something beautifully resonant. Later that week, I brought the clothes to her. When she opened the bag, eyes wide with surprise mingling with appreciation, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. Each piece she tried on revealed not just fabric on skin, but also a layer of strength hidden beneath the seams of doubt. It was a miniature celebration, two friends standing tall in their stories, side by side. Jenna ended up wearing one of the old jackets the next week, my favorite one, paired with confidence that felt new yet familiar, a striking reflection of the growth we both were navigating. That day marked a turning point, not just in how we shared our journeys, but in understanding what it means to lean on each other, to give without losing a piece of yourself. Looking back now, reflecting on that chaotic but beautiful year with Jenna, I realize it's less about what we lose in life and more about what we find when we share. Each moment is a thread in the tapestry of relationships, connecting us in ways we can't always see. It has taught me that every experience, be it joyful or heartbreaking, carries the potential to interlace our lives in profound ways we can never fully understand. And as I gaze into my closet now, each piece still stands as a memory, a promise that there's always space for understanding and compassion, anchored firmly in the bond we chose to foster between us. I never thought I'd find myself in this situation, the kind of dilemma people share online with that dreaded "am I the asshole?" tag, but here I am, sitting at my kitchen table, staring down at an empty plate while my kids are out with their dad. It wasn't always like this. 4 years ago, when the divorce was fresh, I believed we would make co-parenting work seamlessly, share everything, communicate effectively. But reality is rarely so tidy. The kids are still adjusting, they're 10 and 8, and between soccer practice, school events, and their dad's weekend adventures, I'm always trying to figure out how best to keep their lives stable. Then came the incident last week when he decided to lay down some new rules. No more video games during the week, he told me, as if he was handing down a decree from on high. I watched my son, Jack, crush his disappointment, the seismic shift in his little body palpable, while Lily, sweet and earnest, tried to negotiate, her big eyes glimmering with hope. But Dad, what about our homework breaks? She whispered, as if reasoning with gravity. My ex simply shrugged, his way or the highway, and walked out, leaving me to deal with their fallout. My instinct was to comfort them, to explain that their dad just wanted to be responsible and that they would adjust, but part of me wondered if his expectations were fair. Later that week, I made the decision to send them to his place instead of confront him directly or enforce rules I didn't fully agree with. I figured, maybe he could lighten the burden, let him implement his own decisions without me acting as the buffer. But as soon as I drove away, a wave of guilt washed over me. Was I really giving my kids the best shot at a balanced upbringing, or was I dodging my responsibility as a parent? My phone dinged a few hours later with a text from their dad, laced with irritation. "Nice of you to send them over without discussing it first." I stared at the screen and felt a ball of anxiety tighten in my throat. Despite his tone, I had hoped he might realize that I wasn't there to undermine him but to let him take the lead, something I thought he'd appreciate. But instead, all I felt was the familiar pang of fear that I was failing. What if I was just being lazy, avoiding the hard conversations we needed to have about co-parenting? Later that night, while I tucked the kids into bed, I saw what I feared most: Jack's little face crumpled up, confused over why he had to choose between Dad's rules and fun. I tried my best to comfort him, but I could sense the distance growing between us, as if the uncertainty I felt was infecting him, too. "Why can't we just have fun and it be okay?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper, and it broke something inside me. What was I teaching them? That it was acceptable to pass the buck? That parenting was something to avoid? A part of me wanted to fight back and explain how harsh it could feel sometimes, yet another part feared pushing my ex further away, resulting in even more tension between us. I ended up lying awake, the weight of my choices pressing against my chest, unable to shake off the feeling that I might just be setting them up for confusion rather than a permanent solution. Days later, I received a text from my ex. He suggested a family meeting over pizza, which felt like a small olive branch, but I held my breath. It was the same dilemma looming over our heads, but it felt different now, more like a negotiation of emotional stakes than a black and white situation. Could we really move toward understanding each other's perspectives? Or were we destined to trip through mutual resentment? I still don't know how the meeting will go or if I'm the one creating divisiveness, but sitting at my table, I know it's critical to address our doubts. In the end, co-parenting might just be life's grandest mess, and I have to find a way to embrace that chaos for my kids' sake, even if it means controlling my guilt in the process. I hope to approach this journey not as two frazzled parents pulling apart but as a team willing to push through the discomfort for the sake of those innocent little faces, learning together along the way. I take a deep breath, feeling the weight of my thoughts settle on my chest like a thick blanket. The kids are at school, it's just me and the ticking clock echoing in the kitchen, reminding me of the time slipping away before this meeting with Jake. We've had our share of heated discussions, arguments flaring up like fireworks, especially when it came to our different styles of parenting. I often find myself reminiscing about the early days, before everything unraveled and the smiles faded like summer sunsets. Back then, we were a cohesive unit, a duo navigating life together. Now, it feels like we're two ships passing in the night, armed with resentment and frustration instead of compassion. I'm expecting him to come in guns blazing, ready to discuss a recent weekend incident where, in his eyes, I overstepped by allowing our kids to skip their bedtime to watch a movie. He always believed in strict routines, while I thought there was beauty in spontaneity, that sometimes we needed to let go and allow for those unplanned moments that could light up our children's eyes in ways a schedule never could. As I pour myself a cup of coffee, I wonder if this is the day he'll finally understand that not every decision needs to be a binary choice, that maybe, just maybe, we can meet in the middle. The doorbell rings, and my heart races. It's showtime. I open the door, and Jake stands there, hands shoved deep in his pockets, a slight crease lining his brow, a clear sign that today won't be easy. "Hey," he says, his voice even, albeit laced with tension. I can tell we're both straddling a tightrope of unspoken words. "Hi," I reply, trying to inject some warmth into the air, but it feels like I'm pushing against a brick wall. We settle at the table, the same one where we once celebrated birthdays and anniversaries, now a battleground for our parental philosophies. "Let's just get this over with," he says, a hint of exhaustion in his already weary tone. I nod, swallowing my pride, yet desperate to convey that my intention is not to undermine him but to seek a solution that serves the kids instead. As we dive into the conversation, I explain my perspective, emphasizing that those moments of joy, like movie nights, are precious. But they need structure, Michelle, Jake counters, running a hand through his hair, a move I recognize as one of frustration. "I get that," I reply softly, "but we can blend both. They can experience the joy of spontaneity and still have a routine." The tension crackles between us, an undeniable force that seems to be lifting us farther apart rather than bringing us together. But as the conversation flows, I start to catch glimpses of understanding breaking through his resolve. "I just want what's best for them," he finally admits, his voice dropping to a softer tone, vulnerability creeping in. There's a flash of something in his eyes, a flicker of the man I once loved, now buried beneath layers of hurt and anger. I want to reach out and tell him that I want the same, that we're on the same team, even if the landscape of our relationship looks rocky. We don't solve all our problems in that moment, but we find a tentative agreement to communicate better and be more flexible with the kids' needs, interspersed with laughter as we reminisce about our adventures as parents, the things we learned along the way. It's not a perfect resolution, but there's a sense of clarity, a first step taken amidst the chaos. Days pass, and I notice not only the kids adapting but also the shift in our interactions, slowly morphing from tactical maneuvers in the chess game of co-parenting to more fluid collaboration, joint parenting strategies forming organically. There's still awkwardness, but each exchange feels like another layer peeling away. I find small delights in the way our conversations start to shift from contentious to constructive, almost playful. One afternoon, we're out for ice cream with the kids, and I catch Jake stealing glances at me, a smile breaking across his face as our daughter stumbles over a joke, her laughter ringing out like music. I can't help but wonder if maybe, just maybe, we're onto something here. As I watch him lean down to share a secret with our son, a shadow of our shared past floats above us, and I grasp tightly onto that flicker of hope. And yes, it's messy, and sometimes I still doubt if I'm making the right choices, but I also see that both Jake and I are evolving, laying a foundation I never expected to build again. This journey is still evolving, and in embracing the chaos, we might just find a bit of harmony after all. As we pile back into the car, the kids chattering away, I know it's not about erasing the past, but about forging ahead together, and for their sake, I'm willing to keep trying. The car hums softly as I turn the key in the ignition, a familiar routine that now feels like a sweet promise rather than a burden. The kids' voices blend into a joyful symphony behind me, filled with anecdotes about school, art projects, and their latest obsessions with superheroes. Ruby, my youngest, is still that vibrant bundle of energy, her laughter bouncing off the window as she enthusiastically reenacts some cartoon character. Max, ever the quieter one, joins in with his own, quieter enthusiasm, spinning elaborate tales about the cosmic adventures he imagines. As I glance at their faces in the rearview mirror, I can't help but feel the warmth radiating from their innocence. This moment, their laughter, the chaos, even the perpetual mess of snack crumbs and toys, is what I clung to during the hollow moments post-divorce. Jake and I may have our differences, but what remains steadfast is our shared priority, these kids. My heart beats a little harder, knowing we're creating a shared narrative, writing our story word by word even amidst the noise. But then, the undercurrent of anxiety twists in my stomach again as I consider the upcoming family meeting, our first sit-down since our awkward attempts at blending our parenting styles. I had even suggested bringing in a mediator, believing that a neutral third party could help us navigate the rocky waters of our new reality without drowning in resentment. Honestly, I felt like a ship tossed in stormy seas, unsure of whether I'd find safe harbor or capsize under the weight of our past. "Mom, look at this." Ruby suddenly squeals, waving a crumpled piece of paper mid-performance. It's her drawing, a colorful explosion on the page that vaguely reminds me of a rainbow, yet definitely carries all the chaos I might feel inside. "This is you and Daddy fighting the evil robots." I chuckle lightly, the image surreal yet kind, reminding me that somehow, even in our most contentious moments, those little faces still find a way to make sense of things. "And do we win?" I ask playfully, hoping to inspire a solution rather than digging deeper into the abyss of disagreements. "Of course. You always win, Mom." She beams with confidence, solidifying the sense of heroism I sometimes feel falling flat in those tense moments with Jake. It's a fleeting reassurance, but it's enough to allow me some clarity. Maybe winning isn't even the point. The thought lingers, heavy but enlightening, as we pull into our driveway, with its friendly chaos of toys left behind from a previous playdate. As we step inside, I can almost see the ghosts of arguments past lingering in the air, yet there's also the comforting aroma of our evening routine, the smell of something simmering on the stove, the scattered shoes, and backpacks as evidence of busyness. This is our refuge, a home built on love, tension, and the messiness of family life. After dinner, I caught Jake on a rare day when he'd swung by to help me set up for the meeting. I noticed the way he hesitated, taking everything in, as if he were expecting me to lay a landmine somewhere between us. Instead, with all the courage I could muster, I suggested we work on a joint agenda to present to the mediator. This felt like an attempt to heal wounds, to find some middle ground, a step into a shared realm rather than one wrought with individual agendas. "So, what's important to you?" he asked after a long, thoughtful pause. My heart raced, not from the administrative task at hand but from the raw vulnerability of really addressing what we both sought to accomplish. I could easily slide into bitterness, hash out the past mistakes and newfound tensions. Instead, I chose to share my fear of the kids feeling caught in our storm. "I want them to feel safe," I admitted, my voice a whisper dipped in emotion. We were in this together now, and I realized how fundamental it was to set aside old grudges to collaborate toward ensuring they didn't feel like pawns in our unraveling. It felt liberating with just the energy in the room shifting, even if it was only a crack in the ice we both had skated on for too long. With the meeting looming, a flicker of hope ignites again. I can almost breathe in the possibility of redemption. That night, as I stumbled into the quiet of my bedroom, the laughter of the kids fading into soft echoes, I knew the path ahead would remain jagged. Yet, in the chaos and uncertainty of co-parenting, I could finally see we were capable of more than I believed. And perhaps, just perhaps, we would carve our own way, one shared drawing, one awkward discussion, one messy dinner at a time. I never expected to find myself at odds with my family over something as simple as a door. Living alone in a small apartment, I had carved out my little sanctuary, a place where I could escape the world's chaos and indulge in quiet moments with a good book or a long, hot shower. It was my haven, and after the relentless demands of work and social events that filled my calendar, I often craved solitude. That's why, when my aunt and uncle decided to drop by unannounced last Saturday, I felt a rush of anxiety flood through me like ice water. I had barely returned from a stressful week at the office, 2 deadlines looming over me like dark clouds, and the last thing I needed was an unexpected visit. When I heard the persistent knock on my door, my heart sank. Every part of my being screamed to ignore it, to hunker down with some takeout and let the world fade away. They were the kind of relatives who wouldn't take no for an answer, and I had a pretty good idea that they wouldn't be content with a quick pleasantry at the door before moving on. I stood frozen in the hallway, my mind racing. What if they couldn't see how tired I was? Just duck into the kitchen and hope they give up, I thought, but the knocking intensified, almost urgent. I took a deep breath and, against my better judgment, I opened the door just a crack, enough to catch a glimpse of their expectant faces. The look of surprise on my uncle's face morphed into disappointment as he realized I wasn't prepared for their visit. "Oh, hey. We thought we'd stop by. It's been ages," he exclaimed, as if time bent and twisted in some miraculous way to make their interruption appropriate. I felt the corners of my mouth twitch with nerves. "Hi, yeah, sorry. I didn't know you were coming," I stammered, avoiding their eager gazes. The truth was, I was overwhelmed, tired, and bleeding introversion that day. The warmth of my community sometimes felt like a suffocating blanket rather than a comforting embrace. I wanted to say, "I love you both, but could you please just text first next time?" Instead, I just stood there while they continued to chatter about their week like I should be all ears. In amidst their dialogue, my thoughts spiraled. Am I being unreasonable? Am I really the boss of my own space, or have I lost touch with what family means? I scanned the apartment and realized my living room looked like a tornado had swept through. Mismatched socks strewn on the floor, a half-eaten slice of pizza languishing on the coffee table, definitely not the kind of setting I wanted to showcase. I knew they would judge, not that they meant to, but from experience, I knew my aunt's disapproving eyebrow would only rise higher the longer I stood there. "You have a minute?" she asked, as they pushed their way inside, unaware of the whirlwind of emotions brewing inside me. "Actually, I'm really in the middle of something," I mumbled, my voice barely more than a whisper. But my attempt to stand my ground fell flat. Family members don't generally take those kinds of refusals on face value. And, like a slow-burning fuse, resentment began to ignite. I felt trapped between my genuine care for them and my desperate need for peace. The unease spun into a knot in my stomach. Was I the bad guy for wanting to protect my own mental space? They began to settle in, invading my sanctuary with their animated banter, laying their jackets on my couch, leaning over to inspect my bookshelves as if they were an exhibit. It dawned on me that they had no clue how much I longed for solitude at that moment, how important those quiet Saturday afternoons were for my sanity. The more they laughed and caught up, the more distant I felt, like a spectator in my own life. I remembered countless Sunday dinners when spontaneity put a smile on my face, but this one was different. A part of me wanted to just fold into their warmth, to let the walls come down, but the other part was desperate for a clean break from the world outside. Finally, after an hour of small talk filled with casual questions about my work and my love life, or lack thereof, I mustered the courage to intervene, gently asserting, "Hey, I really appreciate you guys stopping by, but I'm feeling a bit exhausted. Can we catch up another time?" Their cheerful expressions faltered, disappointment clouding their faces. "Oh, but we came all this way," my aunt began, her voice dropping an octave, inscribing guilt deeper into the fabric of my resolve. "That's the thing about family, sometimes, even love can carry an expectation, an unspoken demand that feels heavier than steel." As they finally gathered their things, I felt a mix of relief and guilt gnawing at my insides. Had I overstepped? Was I too harsh in my execution? I closed the door behind them, their voices fading down the hall, questioning my choices like fair-minded jurors. Hours passed, and I sat cross-legged on the floor amidst the chaos of my living space, letting the internal battle wane. The authenticity of my emotions washed over me in waves. Maybe I wasn't the asshole. Maybe needing alone time wasn't some personal failing. But the lingering question echoed in my mind, would they see it that way? In the days that followed, I texted my aunt to suggest we meet for coffee later in the week. "I'm sorry I wasn't up for a visit, work has been a lot," I wrote, hoping to bridge the chasm. I saw her reply flash on the screen, "No worries, we'll plan something. We miss you." Part of me sighed in relief, while another part knew this was just the beginning of a longer conversation about boundaries, connection, and the balance of family. Because in the end, maybe it wasn't about being right or wrong, perhaps it was about understanding each other's needs without sacrificing one's own peace. And maybe, just maybe, I could learn to do both. That interaction with my mom lingered in my mind for days. I took that moment to reflect on our relationship, something I had been avoiding for far too long. I never intended to be the estranged family member. I simply found myself caught in the whirlwind of adult life, work obligations, personal goals, and the day-to-day chaos that came with it. But their way of expressing love felt overwhelming at times, like a tidal wave crashing over me. I set aside my phone and gazed out the window, watching as leaves scattered in the wind, twisting and turning in ways that reminded me of the often erratic nature of our family dynamics. My family had long adopted a policy of drop-by unannounced, a tradition I found charming at first but now felt like an intrusion into my carefully curated solitude. I appreciated the effort, truly, but I questioned whether they understood that my home was my sanctuary, a place I needed to recharge away from the world's demands. The guilt of not being who they wanted me to be crept in like an unwanted guest, taunting me with thoughts of how they must perceive my distance. Yet, I had never felt more like myself than I did now, navigating my boundaries. It didn't take long for that uneasy tension to rise again when Thomas, my brother, suggested a weekend visit. I braced myself, knowing that I'd be the odd one out at the dinner table, dishing out platitudes while my family laughed over nostalgic stories, all while I hovered over my thoughts like a wallflower at a party. This time, though, I felt a tug, a mix of obligation and desire to maintain that connection, even if it was strained. "Hey, can we chat about when you guys come?" I typed hesitantly, deciding to voice my concerns before the weekend arrived. I didn't want another instance of family craziness that left me feeling frazzled and misunderstood. A short reply came back, "What's up? We're excited to see you." I swallowed hard. There was that sense of enthusiasm again, crackling through the screen as if I were there with them. Maybe it was an opportunity for understanding, or perhaps it would swing like a pendulum back to my fears of rejection. Saturday morning drapes the house in a hazy light, and the doorbell pierces through the quiet like a gunshot. My heart races as I stand in the middle of the living room, frozen in place, and the moment stretches into eternity. Hand clenched around the doorknob, I hesitated, considering the possibility of peeling back the layers of silence, of explaining that I craved acceptance of my choices, my pace, my space. Instead, I took a deep breath and unlocked the door, plastering on a smile that I hoped didn't betray any anxiety. Their startled faces morphed into grins, and the warmth of their presence filled the hallway, intoxicating and overwhelming all at once. "We brought your favorite." My mom held up a blueberry pie, and for a fleeting second, the sweetness of nostalgia wrapped around me like a hug, but the tension brewed just beneath. I invited them in, trying desperately to hold on to the comfort while wrestling with unease. As they settled in like they owned the place, the conversations rushed and tumbled over each other, but every sound felt amplified, a cacophony of expectation, love, and my desire for silence. I knew I had to seize this moment to lay bare my feelings. "You know," I started, my voice shaking slightly, "I appreciate these spontaneous visits, I really do, but sometimes I just need a little heads up." They halted, all eyes on me, surprise etched across their faces. My stomach knotted, and I can hardly bear the silence that ensued. But then, slowly, my brother nodded while my mom frowned slightly, a wrinkle of puzzlement forming on her forehead. "Oh, honey, we didn't know you felt that way," she whispered, her voice softening. A flicker of hope ignited in me. The moment hung in the air, heavy yet tender, and in that silence, acceptance danced delicately among us, paving a newfound path. As the afternoon rolled on, we spoke more openly, the conversation bridged gaps I feared would swallow me whole. They acknowledged my need for space, and slowly, we carved out a rhythm that allowed for both connection and solitude. By the time the sun dipped below the horizon, the blue sky igniting in a riot of orange and pink hues, we had not only shared laughter and stories but also something even more precious, understanding. I sat back, quietly content, relishing the newfound balance of knowing that love could be given without drowning, that boundaries didn't have to mean isolation, and yes, that my voice mattered in the symphony of our family. As I waved goodbye, my heart felt a little lighter, and I realized this was just the beginning, not just for them, but for me, a dance toward that ever-elusive harmony between connection and self-care. As I watched their car disappear down the winding road, clarity washed over me. I had navigated so many emotional landmines recently, battling guilt and resentment while trying to figure out where I fit into this intricate web of familial love and obligations. I couldn't help but smile. Maybe it wasn't about asserting myself with brash words or avoidance anymore, it was about conversing, sharing space, and, most importantly, communicating my needs without feeling like I was the villain. I felt like I was finally shedding the layers of guilt that had wrapped around me like a heavy blanket for years. The next week, I decided to open a dialogue with my siblings during our regular Sunday video call. The cozy backdrop of my living room, with its soft, ambient lighting, felt like a good setting for what I hoped would be an honest discussion. As we chatted, I could feel my heart racing a little. My brother started talking about an upcoming family reunion, throwing numbers and dates at me as if I was sitting on the edge of a precipice. The old urge to either withdraw or placate them bubbled up. "Hold on a minute," I finally found my voice and said. "I really appreciate that you guys want to include me, but I've been feeling overwhelmed with everything." The screen filled with thoughtful faces as I tried to find the right words. "I love you all, and I want to be part of this, but I also need time for myself. If I push myself to show up for everything, I won't be able to show up at all," I confessed. Silence followed, a rare occurrence. I could see my sister's brow furrowing, and I worried I'd said too much. Then, slowly, her expression softened. "I get that," she said. "We want you to take care of yourself. You're not being selfish. You're human." That simple acknowledgement felt like a life buoy tossed my way when I had been treading water trying to keep everyone else afloat. One by one, they shared. They talked about their own struggles balancing social events and the pressure to conform to family expectations. As I listened, something shifted in the energy of our call, an empathic exchange that filled the gaps I had felt before. Each realization we shared breathed new life into our connection. By the end of that hour, I felt more heard and understood than I had in years. The weight of expectation lifted a little more off my chest, replaced by a reassuring warmth. Maybe they did see me and my struggles after all. Weeks turned into months, and I began to reshape not just my boundaries but our collective family dynamics. I found peace in saying what I needed, be it declining an invitation or suggesting a smaller gathering over a chaotic family event. Surprisingly, changes rippled through us. My siblings began to vocalize their own needs more openly, and in a way, we all started forging a richer, more authentic relationship. In realizing my own boundaries, I inadvertently encouraged them to explore theirs. Looking back, it's funny how that initial hesitation to open the door to unannounced visitors had been a pivotal moment. I didn't shut them out, I just showed them I needed space, a new boundary. It wasn't a rejection, it was a request for understanding. Life with family wasn't about keeping score or avoiding conflict, it was about building a comfortable home in each other's hearts, however imperfect the walls might be. And here I am, on the edge of another sunset, wondering what the future holds for us all, MacGuffins of emotion and history mingling with reverberations of laughter and love. I can feel the promise of more conversations ahead that will continue to carve out our path as we venture toward a fuller, more nuanced version of family. It's not a perfect resolution, but it's a hopeful beginning, one day at a time. I always thought family meant sticking together no matter what, but here I was, standing on the brink of not attending my sister's wedding, and it felt like a betrayal. My sister, Alyssa, had been planning her big day for over a year, and I could see how excited she was about every little detail. But as the date drew nearer, I learned the venue wasn't accessible. For someone who's been in a wheelchair since a car accident a decade ago, it was more than just a minor inconvenience, it felt like a punch to the gut. I vividly remember sitting in my living room, laptop on my lap, scrolling through pictures of the beautiful estate Alyssa had chosen with its sweeping staircases and narrow doorways. I couldn't help but wonder if she had ever envisioned a day when her older brother would be trapped outside, missing the one moment I knew she'd dreamed about since she could barely walk. I tried to shake off the knot tightening in my stomach, convincing myself I could find a way around it. Maybe I could watch the ceremony on video or have someone FaceTime me from the venue. But what kind of brother would I be if I chose to observe from a distance? That thought gnawed at me, pulling at the very fabric of my identity. I wrestled with an internal conflict, feeling a whirlwind of emotions, anger towards my sister for not ensuring the venue was accessible, guilt for even considering not going, and bitterness towards my circumstances, as if they were dragging me into a corner away from being part of the family. I finally picked up my phone, my heart racing as I dialed her number. When she answered, there was a brightness in her voice that made my heart ache. "I can't wait for you to see everything, it's going to be perfect," she exclaimed, and I could almost picture her twirling around in excitement. "About that," I stumbled, my voice thick, and I felt a wave of nausea crash over me as I explained the accessibility issues. There was a loaded silence on the other end before Alyssa's tone shifted. "I didn't think to check. I'm so sorry, I thought it would work," she said, and I could tell she was genuinely upset. I didn't want her day ruined or for her to feel guilty when she shouldn't. "You should still go," I found myself insisting, my throat tight. I just don't know if I can be there and not actually be there, you know?" I hung up feeling like I just dropped an emotional bomb. The days ticked by, and the wedding loomed like a shadow over me. I could picture her in her stunning gown, surrounded by smiling friends and family, while I would be left questioning my place in it all. A week before the wedding, Alyssa called again, her voice more subdued. "Is there any way you can come? I've been looking into portable ramps and maybe we can figure this out." As sweet as her intentions were, the thought of making her scramble at the last minute felt like yet another weight on her shoulders. "You know what? I think it's okay if you and I just FaceTime," I suggested weakly, my heart breaking at disconnecting us in such a pivotal moment. "I love you, Alyssa, but I don't want to be a distraction." The day of the wedding, I dressed up and sat in front of my laptop, fighting back tears as the first chords of the wedding march filled my living room. I could almost feel the warmth of the sun streaming through the trees at the venue and hear the cheers of family members rejoicing. Alyssa looked beautiful, glowing in her gown, but as I raised my hand to wave hello, my heart felt heavier than it ever had. After the ceremony, as I watched my sister laugh and dance, a small part of me felt anger bubbling to the surface, anger at the world for shutting me out, and a bigger part, a sort of bittersweet acceptance, knowing that this was my reality. I realized that distancing myself from the family wasn't the answer, no matter how much it stung. Sure, Alyssa hadn't thought through the accessibility, but she loved me, and that love didn't hinge on the staircases I couldn't climb. As I shut my laptop after the final toast, I felt a mixture of regret and relief. I hadn't been there in person, but in some way, our bond remained intact. Months later, she and I would go to lunch, and in between bites of sweet potato fries, she slipped a note across the table, an invitation to help choose the venue for her renewal of vows in a few years. "I promise it'll be accessible, this time," she winked. And just like that, through all the twists and turns, I found a glimmer of hope that we could advance together, step by step, no matter the distance life put between us. As I sat across from her, the smell of garlic aioli mingling with the warm spring air, I realized how much I had missed moments like this, just the two of us laughing and reminiscing. The sweet potato fries felt like a bridge over the gap that had grown during our years of silence. My sister had always been the one with boundless energy, pulling me along on adventures I never asked for but ended up loving. I remembered all the times I had wheeled alongside her through bustling city streets and quiet parks, her laughter echoing in my ears while my wheelchair was simply a part of the scenery. But then came the wedding, a day that should have been filled with joy, turned into a painful reminder of our differences and the rift that widened with each turn of the planning while she embarked upon without considering my needs. It hadn't been just a physical divide, it had felt like an emotional chasm, one that I feared might never be bridged. When she slipped that note across the table, My heart did a little skip, but I also felt the weight of uncertainty. Could we truly move forward? I stared at the invitation, the elegant script of her handwriting unspooling memories of our childhood, twilight backyard adventures, late-night conversations, and the little secrets we whispered as we tucked ourselves into bed, feeling invincible. I chuckled softly at the graphics she'd sketched. In the margins, twisting shapes of flowers and stars that looked more like a childhood doodle than a wedding concept. So where do we start? I finally asked, my voice betraying the mix of excitement and caution churning inside me. She squeezed her brown eyes in that way she did when she was gleeful, a sign that we were on the same page again. How about the beach? I've always wanted to say I do with the waves crashing behind me. As the conversation flowed, the ideas poured out like a refreshing tide, bringing warmth and a sense of renewal I hadn't realized I was longing for. We drew sketches on napkins, imagined colors that would drip down the canvas of our memories. The sun illuminated our laughter, and for the first time in what felt like ages, I could feel the spark of our bond rekindling. Yet, the doubt lingered in the back of my mind, a quiet reminder that we still had hurdles to overcome. Months passed as we wove through planning meetings, and as my sister pursued her dream, I cheered her on, yet my heart was a mixture of elation and lingering anxiety. How would she react when the spotlight shifted to the accessibility concerns again? Would we be able to mesh our visions, the grandeur of her dream wedding with the stark reality of my needs? I can't help but think of how the last few years had unfolded. The push and pull of our lives seemed like an intricate dance, one where we stepped in and out of sync. Then, the day finally arrived for the venue tour, and the stakes felt immeasurable. With each step closer to the location, my heart raced, anticipation wrapping around me like a comforter. This was a chance for us, not just for her, but for us as sisters. We pulled up to the beach venue, the soft sound of waves greeting us. She hopped out excitedly, taking in the scenery, and my heart tightened with a mixture of hope and dread. "What do you think?" she called back, her voice cutting through the salty breeze. I looked at the row of steps leading to the beautiful sandy stretch, and a lump formed in my throat. "It has to be accessible," I replied, my voice shaky as I formulated the words. There was a pause, then she turned back, her expression transforming from joy to concern. The realization hung between us, a flimsy thread ready to snap. "I didn't even think about that," she admitted softly. I felt a wave of frustration crash over me, but there was something in the way she looked at me, regret mixed with determination. "Let's make sure that it is," I said, grounding her back into the conversation. "What matters is that we celebrate your love, and no one should have to limit themselves based on perceived barriers." As we spent the afternoon discussing every detail from ramps to seating arrangements, I could feel that earlier tension melting away. She listened, genuinely wanting my input, and by the end of it, there was a sense of unity, a reaffirmation that we were partners in this journey. And as I wheeled down the ramp they reluctantly agreed to install, gentle sunlight spilling over us, I couldn't help but feel that we were building something reliable. A relationship that allowed for both of our anxieties and ambitions, stretching into the future like the horizon before us. We were stumbling into a new chapter, and in that moment, every step she took toward inclusivity felt as powerful as the waves crashing behind us, paving the way for us to finally come together. As we rolled away from the fluttering banners and the sound of laughter behind us, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. It was the end of one intense chapter and the hopeful beginning of another. The sun cast a golden glow on the pavement, and every part of me ached to believe that we had finally moved past the doubts and strange tensions that had once defined our relationship. Our lunch promise, nestled between bites of sweet potato fries, felt like a pact, a blend of growth and understanding that I hadn't been sure we'd ever reach. We spent those early days after the wedding navigating each other's perspectives, developing a rhythm that suited both of us. Sarah, ever the planner, wanted to ensure that what had once felt limiting now blossomed into opportunities. I'd go through design magazines stacked on her coffee table, filling the spaces with doodles of accessible moments, visualizations of love and laughter shared across barrier-free tables. Choosing hues and fabrics that spoke to our personalities became a habit we cherished. I'd watch her eyes light up whenever she pitched new ideas, and each time my heart swelled more than the last. One evening, while we sat on her porch adorned with string lights, I shared my fears about everything that had transpired, the doubts that still occasionally crept into my knotted stomach. "What if this is just a moment?" I asked, nervousness inching into my voice. "What if we fall back into old patterns?" She laid her hand across mine, and warmth surged through me as she searched my eyes. "It's just the beginning. We're wiser now, right? We won't ignore our differences, we'll embrace them." It struck me how easily she spun my concerns into threads of commitment, weaving our different experiences into something sturdy. Months rolled on, and those gatherings became pivotal. Each event we attended, every meeting with friends, felt like practice. I learned where the gaps in conversations widened and where certain remarks stuck, and Sarah mirrored my growth with palpable enthusiasm. It was strangely exhilarating, a slow dance of vulnerability and strength. We'd share a laugh or a sidelong glance while standing in a circle of friends, our unspoken connection creating everything from an inside joke to the safety of conversation. After a year of navigating through life together, Sarah proposed we host a weekend retreat for family and friends, another venue on the horizon. This time, she meticulously scouted accessible cabins in the hills, poring over pictures and reviews. I argued that they felt too rustic, but she shrugged it off with that charm I'd come to adore. It's about creating memories, not fitting a mold. We can have fun anywhere. As the retreat weekend approached, I felt those familiar jitters rise. What if things unraveled? What if the old resentments resurfaced? But as friends streamed into the cozy cabin and laughter overshadowed my worries, I felt the sweetness of our hard work settle around us like a hug. Sarah didn't flinch when someone knocked their drink, spilling it across the floor. She smiled, pulled me closer, and called for towels. We adapt. In those little moments, I recognized just how much we had evolved, no longer sidestepping anything difficult. We faced it head on, laughing about mishaps, sharing stories late into the night. As everyone gathered around the campfire, roasting marshmallows and sharing ghost stories, I leaned back, soothed by the crackling flames. The weathered cabin surrounded us felt strong, just like our bond. There was something beautifully imperfect about building our new reality together, one where glances spoke volumes and where every shared experience was a step forward, however small. I could feel the roots of our relationship deepening, intertwining, much like the intertwining branches of the trees around us, and with it came a promise that neither of us would ever stop trying to understand. When Sarah caught my eye and raised her marshmallow-coated stick, I realized that this was more than a moment, it was a commitment, a radiant journey forged through respect and love. It wasn't just about getting things right, it was about creating the space to be wrong, to grow, and together, soar against any odds. I squeezed her hand, my heart whispering words of gratitude, knowing that our story was still unfolding beautifully, in ways neither of us could predict. It was one of those Saturday afternoons where the sun seemed to hang a little lower in the sky, bathing everything in a warm golden light. I was just wrapping up my shift at the local diner, exhausted but oddly content. I had spent the day serving coffee and pancakes to the usual crowd, a familiar mix of regulars and unfamiliar faces. As I tossed my apron aside and climbed into my old truck, the smell of grease and syrup lingered, a strange comfort after a long shift. My plan was simple, a quick trip to the recycling center with a collection of cans I had saved up. I didn't think much of it, a handful of aluminum from my kitchen and the diner combined, a tiny contribution to my Friday night cleanup ritual. But as I parked in front of the recycling center, I noticed a woman standing by my truck, her eyes darting around like a squirrel on caffeine. Maybe it was the weariness of the day, or perhaps a rush of instinct, but something about her felt off. Still, I brushed it aside, pulled out my phone to scroll mindlessly through social media while I waited. A few moments passed before I looked up to see her rummaging in the back of my truck, lifting the bag of cans as if it were the Holy Grail. My heart dropped. "Hey! What are you doing?" I yelled, more out of shock than anger. I should have just let it go, but something snapped inside me. Maybe it was the day overriding my sleep-deprived brain, but I jumped out of the truck, my feet hitting the pavement with purpose. "That's mine." I found myself standing there, half expecting her to drop the bag and flee. But she turned to face me, and that's when I noticed the lines on her face, the weariness in her eyes that mirrored my own. "It's just cans," she shrugged, her voice sharp yet tinged with an edge of desperation. I felt a rush of sympathy mingling with my anger. Maybe she was struggling, maybe these cans were worth more to her than to me. Yet I thought back to how hard I worked for those pennies, each can a testament to my efforts. "I get it," I said, softer now, trying to find common ground. "But they're mine. I need to take them to recycling." The tension in the air was palpable, like rubber bands stretched to their limit. For a moment, we both stood there, two strangers caught up in an unwinnable standoff. I wasn't a confrontational person by nature. I often preferred to drift through the world rather than disturb the status quo, but here I was, presenting a challenge. Something flickered in her eyes, a mixture of anger, shame, and maybe a hint of vulnerability. "This is how I pay for my kids' lunch," she blurted out, her voice cracking. My heart softened further, each beat echoing doubt in my mind. Was I an asshole for wanting to stand my ground? Was I denying her the means to survive? I took a deep breath and tried to rationalize it all. I'm sure you're struggling. I get it. But I can't just give this to you. We hovered in this uncomfortable limbo, the weight of her desperation palpable. The bags of cans and my anger felt so trivial in the face of her honesty. I felt torn, split between being protective of my meager possessions and recognizing a need that resonated deep within my own heart. In a moment that felt like an eternity, I decided to compromise. How about this? I'll help you gather more cans, and you can take any we find together. I could use an extra set of hands. The tension peaked for a split second, then slowly began to unravel. Her brow furrowed in disbelief as if trying to gauge my sincerity. You wouldn't just call the cops? She asked, her body relaxing but still cautious. I shook my head. No, I won't. We're just two people trying to get by. In the end, we spent the next half hour combing through the neighborhood, collecting discarded cans. As we gathered our bounty, we talked. I learned her name was Maggie and that she was a single mother struggling to make ends meet. She was filled with laughter that sounded both weary and hopeful. I realized that my earlier irritation was so small compared to the stories people were carrying, including my own. When we finished, we looked at our small haul, and I dug into my pocket to pull out a $10 bill. Here. Just for today, I said, feeling a warmth build in my chest. This might not be much, but go buy those kids a few sandwiches. Maggie hesitated for a moment, then accepted the money, tears welling in her eyes. Thank you, she whispered, and for the first time that day, I felt something within me lift, a sort of lightness that came from sharing the burden. I drove away that day with my heart heavier yet somehow also free, reflecting on how sometimes standing your ground could mean building a bridge instead. Months later, I still think about that afternoon. Did it fix everything? No. Did I get my cans back? Well, I learned to look beyond those cans for a moment, beyond possessions and comfort. I guess the world isn't just about fighting to protect what's yours. Sometimes, it's about recognizing what you can give up and seeing how far kindness can stretch, even if it comes from unexpected places. In a way, we both walked away with something that day, just not what we initially thought we needed. It's funny how life teaches you lessons in the most unpredictable ways. That day with the woman and my bag of cans shifted something deep within me, though the overt changes weren't immediate. I still had that tiny moment etched in my memory, the way her eyes briefly lit up when I handed her a couple of dollars, how taken aback she was when I told her to keep the cans. I had expected anger, had braced myself for her indignation when I confronted her about the theft, but the twist caught me off guard. Instead, I found a person who was just as lost in the world as I sometimes felt. It occurred to me that maybe what I saw as a desperate act of theft was part of a larger story I didn't know. I recalled her dirty hands, her weathered face, and the sadness that lingered like a shadow. As the weeks turned into months, I found myself reflecting on our encounter more often than I'd like to admit. Initially, I tried to justify my actions, clinging to my right to get my property back, convinced that I was in the right. But gradually, my grip on that sense of righteousness loosened. I would drive by the same corner where she had taken the cans, and I began to wonder about her life, who she was outside of that moment. Did she have friends? Was she okay? Occasionally, I'd see others like her, standing on the streets, carrying their circumstances like a heavy load, and I felt an urge to engage, to ask if they were all right. One night, on my way home from a late shift, I stopped at a local diner. It was nothing fancy but had decent burgers and endless coffee. As I was finishing my meal, a woman approached me, an all too familiar look in her eyes. It was her, the woman from the truck. My heart raced. She looked different, more alert, perhaps. I could see the scarring from whatever struggle she was battling, but there was also resilience in her expression. I wasn't sure if she recognized me, but I decided to take the leap. I smiled and said, "Hey, it's you. From the corner. With the cans." She blinked, a flash of recognition crossing her face before she hid it. "Yeah, I remember," she replied, a mix of pride and discomfort in her voice. I could sense the walls she'd built were still towering high. Yet, it didn't end there. We ended up talking for an hour over greasy fries, and I learned more about her circumstances than I anticipated. Her name was Rachel, and she had been struggling for years, trying to make ends meet in a world that kept kicking her when she was down. I shared bits about my life too, my own failures and frustrations, finding common threads of struggle and resilience that bridged the social gap between us. As we shared stories, I began to see humanity in Rachel, and she in me. What started as a moment of conflict turned into a profound connection. I was astonished at how little a person sometimes needs to feel heard. I offered her a few more dollars, insisting it was for a meal, nothing more, and she hesitated but took it. Our exchange felt interwoven with something rich and unspoken, the air humming with unacknowledged understanding. Months later, when I think about that day, I realize it was more than reclaiming my bag of cans or sorting out who was right or wrong. It had spiraled into something beautiful, showing me that sometimes standing your ground means building a bridge instead. I don't always see her, but whenever I do catch a glimpse of her, there's a nod of recognition that passes between us, a silent agreement grounded in empathy. It's strange how kindness can spread like ripples in a pond, starting from a simple act that feels so mundane in the grand scope of life. Little by little, I learned to look beyond possessions, and in doing so, I discovered the true essence of what it means to care for others, and that, perhaps, was the greatest reward of all. I still remember the first time I saw her again after that day by my truck. It was a rainy afternoon, the kind of day that pulls the colors out of the world, making everything look muted and gray. I was walking home from work, my mind tangled in thoughts about the week ahead, meetings that felt pointless and deadlines looming like storm clouds. Just as I turned the corner, I saw her huddled under a bus stop awning, the same worn-out jacket pulled tight around her shoulders. For a moment, I hesitated. Was she still that woman who had taken my bags of cans? I thought about the anger and fear that had welled up in me when I'd confronted her, how I had been ready to yell, ready to proclaim my territory. But now, as I stood there watching her count something in her lap, maybe a few stray coins, maybe hopes for the day, I felt that old tension fade away. Instead of crossing the street to avoid her, I walked closer. "Hey," I said, trying to sound casual, as if the weight of our previous encounter didn't hang in the air between us. She looked up, surprise flickering across her face. "I remember you." The way she said it sent a rush of unexpected warmth through me. I caught her eye and nodded. There was no animosity this time, only a shared moment that acknowledged our past. "What are you doing out here?" I asked, the rain drizzling down and inviting us both into a more intimate conversation. "Waiting for a friend," she replied, her voice sounding small yet steady. Not sure what I was thinking, honestly. I glanced at the bus schedule, then back at her. "Want to grab a coffee? There's a little place just down the street." She hesitated, biting her lip, and I could sense her internal struggle. This wasn't the typical interaction you'd have in a city, especially with someone you had a rocky history with. But she did something surprising. She nodded, and that felt like a bridge between us, even if it was fragile. As we settled into a small booth at the cafe, the scent of fresh brewing coffee wrapping around us, I learned her name, Maya. It turned out her world was much darker than I had guessed. She shared stories of losing a job and stumbling into hard times, realities that were stark and raw. I thought about the anger that had bubbled within me when she'd taken what was mine, completely ignorant of what was happening in her world. "Look, I know what I did was wrong," she said quietly, tracing the rim of her coffee cup with her finger, "but it wasn't just about the cans. I wasn't thinking straight. I was desperate." Her honesty hit me like a cold splash of water. I had spent most of my adult life pinching pennies, too, and it made me question how I would have reacted in her shoes. What do you do when the world turns its back? "I get it," I said slowly. "I really do. But there's no shame in asking for help." That seemed to resonate with her. We talked for hours, two people who had been strangers, now sharing bits and pieces of their lives over steaming mugs. She was funny and insightful, and I started to see the glimmer of hope in her eyes, a light that had been dimmed but wasn't entirely extinguished. By the time we parted ways, that nod I had used to recognize her before became a wave, an acknowledgement that we were both just trying to navigate our way through life's complications. In the months that followed, our encounters became more frequent. Sometimes she'd call if she needed a referral for a job. Other times, I'd see her at the same bus stop, and we'd share quick laughs about life's absurdities. It didn't always lead to deep conversations or outstretching help, but the familiarity felt comforting, a reminder that human connections could blossom from the most unexpected circumstances. Reflecting back on it all, I learned something critical: we all have our battles, our shabby jackets we wear to shield ourselves from the world. But maybe what makes our journeys worthwhile is not just the things we gather along the way, those cans, those ambitions, but the people we meet and the finite moments when we open ourselves to understanding. I never got those bags of cans back, but, honestly, I've come to realize that sometimes what you think you need pales in comparison to understanding someone else's struggle. We both gained something that day we stepped out from behind our defenses, and as I walked home that night feeling lighter, I knew that bridge between us was something I'd treasure far more than any material possession.